Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make this knife slingshot. As I showed in the previous shooting video of this slingshot has got a knife coming out the bottom, which is concealed inside the handle of the slingshot, and it's held in place by two magnets so that it can't fall out. And this is a small knife which is really sharp, and it's made out of some whant tool steel which I've heat treated up to really hard, and it's really sharp. So let's see how you make it. First I'm going to trace on this middle piece of the wood onto 2 layers of multiplex plywood, and then I'll cut out twice. So this is what the two pieces look like once I've cut them out. Now I'm going to glue them together using a 2-part epoxy. So I've got both pieces clamped up, now I've got to leave the glue to set. So while I'm waiting for the epoxy to completely set, I'm going to start work on making the knife which goes inside the handle.
The metal that I'm using to make the knife is some 3mm thick knife making carbon steel, and I'm cutting out with an angle grinder that's got a thin metal cutting blade on. For the metal you can also use an old file if you temper it in a forge and then leave it to cool down, then you can use that because it's got a really high carbon content. So now I'm just using a metal file to file the knife into a much more precise shape. To deepen the finger grooves I'm using a half-round metal file. As you can see on my vise, I've got some aluminium vise jaws, and that will stop the vise from being able to mark the steel. Now I'm just curving the steel with my file, so I'm just tapering the edges, and that'll make it much easier to hold, and it'll mean that it's a much more ergonomic shape and it fits my hand better.
So now that I've got the knife shaped to how I'd like it, I'm going to start to create the edge.
I'm going to be grinding the edge using my bench grinder, and I'm also going to be using my belt sander to polish it up just a little bit to get some of the deep scratches out of it.
So I got the edge made on this side, and as you can see it's all the way up halfway here. Now I'm going to do it on the other side.
So once I've made the edge on the other side and they both meet in the middle to make a knife blade, I'm just going to be finishing it up with a file just to make sure that the blade is flat and smooth so that it doesn't have any deep lumps in it.
So now I've finished with the files and the edge is really good. Now I'm just going to do a bit of file work in the back for where my thumb is going to grip.
So now I'm just using a triangle file to make some thin lines going down the edge, and that's just going to help me grip the knife a bit better, and it also adds to the looks.
So now as you can see I've created file work going all the way down the spine of the knife. So once the two pieces are glued together, what I've then gone and done is traced on the side profile of the slingshot like this, then onto this part, and you might not be able to see it very well because of the light, but I also then traced on this thin knife which I've made. So now I'm just going to start to file down some of the basic profile of the edge pieces and the finger groove.
I'm using a half-round rasp to shape all of the wood, but a Dremel tool could also be used.
So once I've filed this edge bit down and it feels quite nice to hold, I'm then going to trace on the shape of the knife onto here and just check that it all fits quite nicely on, and then none of the knife will be coming off the edge of the slingshot. Then I'm going to get some thin plywood like this. It doesn't have to be plywood, it's just got to be some sort of material which you can easily remove. And as you can see, the plywood is the exact same thickness as the steel that I made this knife out of, and that's really convenient because what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put the plywood on here with the shape of the knife cut into it, and then the knife will be able to slide into it like that.
So I'm just cutting out the plywood with a hacksaw, and then for any of the finer details I'm just going to be using the rasps again.
So now as you can see I felled this piece of wood like this, and it'll fit on like that, and then the knife will be able to slide in the bottom like that, and it fits perfectly in there. I don't even have to hold it in, and I can shake it about, it doesn't fall out. Now I'm going to epoxy this wood carefully onto this piece here. So now I've glued on this piece of wood like this, and the knife still really easily fits into the handle like that. Now I'm going to file the edge of this so that it's flush with the wood.
So again, I'm just going to be using a hacksaw to remove any larger pieces, and then for the final shaping, once it gets close into the wood, I'm just going to be using rasps again.
So now I've got a thin piece of wood clamped on this side bit here, and as you can see I've just got the knife in here, and I'm not putting it all the way in because I'm just using wood glue, but even then I want to be able to get out easily if any of the glue does squirt into the sheath. So I finished gluing on the piece of wood, and then I've rasped it down into shape, and also the knife fits really well into there like that, but it can quite easily come out. And as you can see here on the end of the knife right here, I've drilled a little hole and just attached a thin piece of wire so that when you push it in you can easily pull it out. Now I'm going to attach some magnets in here to stop the knife from being able to just fall out. So that's the first hole for the magnet drill. Now I'm just going to get the knife and I'm going to slide it into the sheath like that, and then I'm just going to push the magnet in. Okay, so I've glued in the magnets now, and I used some super glue just to hold them in place, and I've put a second one in here as you can see, and now this knife is easily held into the sheath and it's definitely not going to be falling out. So now I'm gluing on a big offcut of oak onto the rest of the slingshot. So the glue's set, now I'm going to start cutting down the oak and rasping it down to shape.
Because the oak is so dense and hard, it takes quite a long time to use a rasp to get rid of all of the waste material. So I'm going to be using a wood saw quite a lot, but for some of the finer details I'm definitely going to need to use a rasp, and that's going to take a really long time.
So I've rasped the oak roughly down into shape so that it's the flush with all of these finger grooves. And now also what I've gone and done is I've glued on some acrylic plastic on the other side here just to make them roughly the same thickness on each side, and underneath the acrylic just to hide up the magnets, which I put to hold the knife in place, which I also added a piece of string on the handle because it looks better than the wire like this. Underneath the acrylic I went and put some thin cloth which I glued down with the epoxy, and I wrote on it TAOW, standing for The Art of Weapons, and unfortunately I didn't write it in a waterproof marker, so the ink has ran a little bit, and if I ever do this again, because it does look like it's worked quite well, I would next time write it in waterproof marker. Now I'm going to file down all of the acrylic and the oak so that it fits my hand nicely. I need to be really careful that when I'm filing down this side that I don't go into the sheath where it's holding the knife.
So the main thing that I'm doing is using rasps and files to curve all of the sharp edges so that everything's curved and there's no 90-degree edges on the handle.
So I've shaped up the basic handle for the slingshot, and it's still really rough, but it feels quite nice to hold, and these finger grooves are really curved. Now I'm going to shape all of this top part.
So for shaping the top part, what I did was first I used just a normal rasp to file down the two pieces of wood which I glued together so that they were flush with each other, and then I started shaping the actual indents into the wood. So I was basically just curving the wood with the rasps and files so that there was always contours in the wood which you could see with different layers of 18mm multiplex plywood.
So now I've shaped everything so that it looks how I'd like it, and I really like the way that it's shaped. Now I'm going to start to curve all of these edges so that they're smooth and not sharp like this.
When I'm curving the edges with the slingshot with a half round rasp, I'm always trying to make the slingshot look like it's just one big continuous curve going all the way around, so that there's no sharp edges or sharp corners.
So now as you can see I've rounded all of these edges, and if you hold it in the thumb and finger support method it actually feels really nice, as well as just in the normal hammer grip method which it was made for. And also as you can see I've rounded this top bit smooth like this, and then put a groove with a rat tail file going all the way around, and this is for the bands to attach. Now that everything's shaped the way I'd like it, I'm going to go around with just a normal metal working file and get out all of the really deep scratches that the rasp creates. So I've gone over everything with the files, and now all of the deep scratches are out of the wood. Now I'm just going to put some pins going through the handle, mainly for decoration, but also just for a little bit of more strength, just so that the handle holds together a bit better. And I'm just going to drill little holes and then put pins through them. So I've put 5 pins going all the way through this middle piece here. You can't really see them because they're quite small, but they'll show up much easier on the camera once I've oiled and sanded the slingshot down and the pins are really shiny. but these pins go all the way through here, then come out the other side on here, and I haven't put any in this main handle piece just because otherwise I'd go through where the knife is going to be. So now that everything's completely shaped up and I've got all of the deep scratches out of it with the rasp, and I've also put the pins in that I want to, I'm going to start the long and boring process of sanding this Slingshot up to 600 grit. I'm going to start with 120 sandpaper and work my way all the way up to 600 grit.
For the heavy sanding, I find it much easier if I put the sandpaper around a file, just wrap it round, and I normally use a half round file to do that. And then for some of the closer sanding, some of the sanding with higher grits like 400 grit and 600 grit, I like to just wrap it around a pen so that I can get into small areas more easily, and I know when to move on to the next grit because the sandpaper is no longer removing any more scratches.
After about half an hour of polishing, I've got the acrylic piece up to 1000 grit, and now you can clearly see TAOW below it, and it is literally so smooth. Now I'm going to polish the rest of the wood, which is at 240 grit up to 600 grit.
It's really important that you get any scratches out with the lower grit sandpaper like 120 grit, because then the higher grit sandpapers you'll be able to use much more quickly because there'll be no deep scratches to get out.
So I've got the whole thing sanded up to 600 grit apart from the acrylic, which is sanded up to 1000 grit, and the Slingshot feels really nice and smooth. Also, I've taken special care to sand these top bits up to 600 grit so that they're really smooth, and the smoother they are, the longer the bands will last going over the top. So now I'm going to start work on polishing up this knife, and as you can see, it's got lots of really deep scratches in it, so I'm just going to polish it up to about 400 grit before I heat treat it.
With polishing the knife, again I want to wrap the sandpaper around a file, so mainly so that I don't get any curved edges in the steel, which I don't want to get, and that all of the edges remain sharp. And with the sandpaper, when filing the knife, it can get used up really quickly and go really smooth, so you want to keep on using fresh pieces of sandpaper.
So this is what the knife looks like once I've finished it. I've actually gone and heat treated it, and that took a really long time because once I heat treated it, it had lots of black oxide on it from the propane torch which I used. I'm not going to be showing me heat treating it in this video simply because it'll take up a long time, and this video is already getting quite long, and there's lots of other videos on how to heat treat knives, so if you want to know how to heat treat a knife, just search it on YouTube. So I've polished the whole knife up to 400 grit, and it's really sharp on the top. I had to take the little string handle off the bottom when I heat treated it because otherwise it would have caught fire. Now I'm going to oil the Slingshot with some linseed oil. So now I need to leave the oil to set before I apply 3 layers of polyurethane varnish. So I've finished the Slingshot and I've gone and attached some bands. I coated it in 3 more layers of some sunflower oil because my linseed oil ran out, and that doesn't really make much of a difference. And then I coated it in 3 layers of some invisible polyurethane varnish to protect it from any scratches which it might get. The rubber on this Slingshot has got a 35-pound roll weight. So now let me show you a few clips of the Slingshot shooting. If you want to see the full shooting video, just click in the link in the description down below. So thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button down below. Also, I made this Slingshot because it's a suggestion suggested by one of the people who commented in the video description down below, and if you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button and subscribe.